When you think about history's most powerful women, what first pops into your head? Is it, queens born into royalty, the ones with that undeniable claim?
Yeah, the ones who just inherited it all.
Exactly. Or maybe it's a more, complex story, full of cunning, maybe some audacious ambition, where power isn't just given, it's taken.
Definitely.
Tonight, we're going to dive deep into exactly that kind of story. We're talking about the extraordinary life of Catherine the Great.
A fascinating figure. Truly.
We're basing this on, a whole collection of historical sources, different insights. We want to try and uncover the surprising truths behind how she rose up and how she ruled.
Mhm.
Our mission really is to cut through those legends, to understand not just what Catherine did, but how. How she wielded power, how she reshaped a massive empire, and how she just completely defied what everyone expected back then.
Yeah, to reveal the nuanced reality, this idea of a philosopher queen, but one with, an iron grip. It's a story that really challenges our ideas about leadership, especially, for a woman in the 18th century. Like you said, Catherine didn't just inherit a crown. She meticulously rewrote what it meant to deserve one.
Right.
Our sources, they pretty clearly show she ruled not by, divine right or anything. It was sheer force of will, political smarts, and just relentless calculation.
Okay, so let's dig into that. Starting right at the beginning, which seemed, pretty unpromising.
Yeah, really impressive.
Long before she was Catherine the Great, Empress of all Russia, she was just Sophie. Sophie Federica Augusta von Anhalt-Zerbst, born in 1729.
Quite a mouthful.
It is. And she was the daughter of this relatively obscure German princely family. Her tiny little duchy in Pomerania. It offered basically nothing in terms of power.
Minor leads, really.
But Sophie herself, she had something else. A really sharp mind, incredible resilience, and this sort of quiet, burning hunger for greatness, I guess you'd call it.
You can see hints of it early on.
Yeah. Sources describe her upbringing as strict. Her mother was apparently cold, calculating. Her father, more distant. So from a young age, Sophie learned to walk this fine line, between obedience and cunning. She devoured books, watched people really keenly, and those skills, they turned out to be pretty essential survival tools later on, especially in one of Europe's most brutal courts.
And what's really remarkable there is just how precarious it all was for her right from the start. She was summoned to Russia in 1744.
Yeah.
Just 14 years old.
14, wow.
Yeah, summoned by Empress Elizabeth to marry Grand Duke Peter, the heir. She arrives in freezing St. Petersburg, apparently wearing thin German clothes, but carrying herself with this surprising grace. And to become acceptable, she had to convert to Russian Orthodoxy. She took the name Ekaterina, or Catherine. This was, it was a profoundly symbolic act, life-altering.
Like burning her bridges.
Totally. Burning bridges. Stepping into this massive foreign empire with absolutely no way back. Nobody looking at that quiet, observant teenager could possibly have guessed the earthquake she was about to cause.
And talk about a mismatch in that marriage. It was meant to secure her place, but it sounds more like a trap.
Oh, absolutely.
Peter, the husband, was immature, awkward, famously obsessed with toy soldiers, more interested in playing war games than, governing or even paying attention to his new wife.
Right. Some accounts even say he refused to consummate the marriage for years, just focused on drilling his little toy army.
Seriously, while she's trying to learn Russian.
Exactly. He openly loved Frederick the Great of Prussia, hated the Russian court. Catherine, meanwhile, she embraced Russia fiercely, learned the language, studied the history, memorized the Orthodox rituals. She was desperate to belong.
Well, he just wanted out.
Pretty much. He seemed only to want to escape.
And this personal mismatch, it had huge political weight, right? Especially in that court. You called it a viper's nest.
Oh, it was. Gossip, paranoia, brutal power games. Empress Elizabeth was still ruling, but her health was failing. Everyone knew a change was coming.
So Catherine was under a microscope.
Constantly. Letters read, friendships watched, every move scrutinized. She couldn't really trust anyone. Not her husband, not her mother, not even her servants.
That sounds terrifyingly lonely.
It must have been. But Catherine wasn't naive. She learned to play the court's games, quietly, cultivating allies in the shadows.
How did she do that?
Well, she charmed military officers, befriended scholars, built this reputation for dignity, for restraint, a real contrast to her husband's childish tantrums and his open contempt for anything Russian. And behind closed doors, she started reading, Voltaire, Montesquieu, the Enlightenment thinkers, slowly building this vision, not just for herself, but maybe for Russia, too.
That sounds like such a dangerous tightrope walk. How covert did she have to be with these allies? Was she targeting specific people or just anyone influential?
It was incredibly delicate. She definitely went after key military figures like the Orlov brothers. They were rising stars. They're getting pretty fed up with Peter themselves.
Ah, okay.
But she also, quietly made connections with scholars, intellectuals, building this small but influential network that valued her intelligence, not just her marriage.
Smart.
Her approach wasn't about big, flashy moves. It was more about consistent, subtle signals, loyalty to Russia itself, something Peter completely failed at.
And then her moment arrived, 1762. After nearly 20 years of waiting, watching, maneuvering.
Yep. Empress Elizabeth dies. Peter becomes Peter III.
And his reign just implodes almost immediately, right?
Instantly. In just a few months, he ticks off everybody.
Right.
Alienates the church by grabbing their lands, offends the nobles by threatening their privileges.
And the army famously insulted the army.
Oh yeah, praising Prussia, Russia's enemy, making soldiers wear Prussian-style uniforms, a huge insult. Plus, he was openly talking about divorcing Catherine to marry his mistress. The court was already nervous about him. Now they just turned ice cold. Even regular Russians saw him as this foreign puppet mocking their ways.
The perfect storm for her.
Exactly. And that's when Catherine made her move. July 1762. Peter's away at his summer palace.
And she just goes for it.
She launches this decisive, almost bloodless coup, supported by those military officers like Gregory Orlov and his brothers. She rides through St. Petersburg in full Imperial Guard uniform, mind you.
No way.
Yes. Proclaimed Empress Catherine II. Wins the immediate loyalty of the Guard. Peter, caught totally off guard. No allies left. Surrenders within days.
And then?
Taken into custody. And just a short time later, found dead. Very mysterious circumstances.
Mysterious how?
Officially, hemorrhoidal colic.
Scoffs. Seriously. Call it.
Unofficially, pretty much everyone assumed a murder, likely orchestrated by allies wanting to secure Catherine's position.
Okay, but that official story is so flimsy. Did that cause problems for her? Did it undermine her authority right away?
That's a really key point. You'd think so, right? But while everyone, especially in the court, probably knew what really happened, nobody seriously challenged it.
Why not?
Stability. In that system, absolute monarchy, stability was everything. By giving an official story, even a weak one, she kept up the appearance of legitimacy.
Yeah.
And honestly, Peter was so unpopular, most people were just relieved he was gone.
Wow. Brutal pragmatism.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about 18th century politics. The ends often justified the means, especially if those means brought order.
So what does this really mean for you, the listener? Catherine's rise. It isn't just some old story. It's like a masterclass in grabbing power.
Absolutely.
It's a stark reminder that real influence is often forged. Through audacity, smarts, clever alliances, not just inherited. Here you have an exiled, foreign-born woman, no legitimate claim, seizing the throne without a single battle. That's incredible. It shows power can absolutely be taken and earned.
Yeah, it's a testament to her political skill that she managed such a huge shift with so little actual fighting. She made herself the only real alternative to Peter's mess.
So, okay, she has the crown. She could have just relaxed, right? Enjoyed the power.
But that wasn't Catherine.
Nope. She had something much bigger in mind than just, sitting on a throne. She wanted to transform Russia, not just militarily or politically, but culturally, intellectually.
And this is where that philosopher queen idea really comes into play. While Peter was obsessed with Frederick the Great, Catherine looked up to Voltaire, Diderot, the Enlightenment thinkers.
Right.
She genuinely believed in reason, progress, education. Even the radical idea that a monarch should be a servant of the people, even while ruling as an absolute autocrat herself.
That's a contradiction right there.
A huge one. But she didn't just read philosophy, she engaged with it. Famously wrote back and forth with Voltaire for over 15 years, flattering him but also subtly defending her own power. She invited Diderot to her court. When he was broke, she bought his entire library to help him out, then hired him back as its librarian.
Wow. That's patronage.
And behind the scenes, she was poring over legal texts, debating reforms, trying to figure out how to modernize this massive empire.
And she didn't waste time trying to put some of those ideas into practice, right? At least on paper.
Not at all. Early in her reign, she focused on law, formed the Legislative Commission in 1767, this huge, ambitious project to rewrite Russia's entire legal code. and her own nakaz, or instruction for it. It was basically a political manifesto disguised as guidelines, talking about equality before the law, condemning torture, saying rulers had a responsibility to the common good.
Which must have sounded revolutionary in 18th century Russia.
Absolutely groundbreaking for the time and place. Radical stuff.
I know, there's always a but.
Always. This was Catherine's constant balancing act. Enlightenment ideals versus Russian reality.
Which what?
A vast, feudal, deeply conservative place, ruled by powerful nobles who liked things just the way they were, especially their control over the serfs.
Right. Can't upset the nobles.
Exactly. So while she advocated reform, she moved very, very carefully. She did abolish some torture, expanded secular education, founded the Smolny Institute for Noble Girls, which was huge.
That was revolutionary for women's education, though.
Totally. Yet she also very shrewdly confirmed the nobility's control over their serfs. Why? To keep them loyal.
Ah, the tightrope walk.
Precisely. The tightrope walk between ideology and survival. Philosopher queen in public, maybe, but a practical, sometimes ruthless empress in private. Her vision was bold, but always, always calculated.
It really highlights that classic problem for reformers, doesn't it? How do you push forward big ideas without completely destroying the power base you need to make any changes at all? But for the serfs, that balance must have felt like a betrayal of those Enlightenment ideals she talked about. How do historians deal with that contradiction?
They mostly see it as pragmatic compromise.
Yeah.
Catherine knew, she absolutely knew, that without noble support, her reign wouldn't last. Remember Peter III.
Good point.
So while her personal ideals might have leaned towards liberation, the political reality in Russia meant freeing the serfs could have caused a massive noble revolt.
Yeah.
Maybe cost her the throne.
So she chose stability.
She chose stability over radical reform in that specific, huge area. It's a classic case. Prioritizing the means of power, keeping the state intact, over maybe the purity of the ends.
And she wasn't just focused inward. Reforming Russia wasn't enough. She wanted to expand it, make it bigger, stronger, more respected, maybe feared.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where Peter the Great had kind of opened a window to the west, Catherine wanted to knock down the walls, stretch Russia's borders further than ever.
And the Ottoman Empire was a major target.
One of the biggest. Wars against them, the 1760s, 1770s. This wasn't just about land, it was about prestige, influence. Catherine saw herself as, like, the liberator of Orthodox Christians under Muslim rule,
Yeah.
protector of Eastern Europe. And under her generals, Russia won big, took Crimea, the northern Black Sea coast, and crucially, got access to those warm water ports. Something Russian rulers had wanted for generations.
Game changer.
Huge game changer. Symbolically massive, too. Telling Europe, Russia isn't some backward cousin anymore. We're a continental power.
And then Poland.
Then Poland. She participated in the partitions of Poland with Austria and Prussia 3 times. By 1795, Poland was literally wiped off the map. Russia gained huge territories, millions of new subjects, completely redrew the map of Eastern Europe.
Okay, let's unpack that. Can a ruler really be enlightened if they're also conquering neighbors and ruling with absolute power?
That's the million ruble question, isn't it?
Critics definitely accuse her of just being power-hungry, imperialistic. But for her, it seems like expansion was destiny, a sign of Russia's greatness.
She seemed to believe a great ruler was measured by borders as much as by ideas. Her reign really shows that tension, trying to embrace Enlightenment ideas while holding absolute power and using military might.
It really does highlight that complex duality.
Yeah, the structure of her power meant she could only push reform so far before hitting limits, either her own authority or just the harsh realities of controlling such a vast, diverse empire.
So for all her brilliance and power, Catherine was also famous for what happened behind palace doors, and not just in the library.
Chuckles. That's putting it mildly. Yeah, her private life was incredibly public, in a way. One of the most talked about things.
The lovers.
The lovers, not just one or two. A whole succession of them. Often much younger, handsome, and sometimes politically powerful themselves.
She didn't hide them.
Not really. She often rewarded them openly, titles, estates, pensions, if they behaved themselves.
And Potemkin was the big one?
I will agree, Potemkin.
Yeah.
As brilliant and bold as she was, their relationship really blurred the lines of romance, politics, partnership. Some historians even think they might have secretly married.
Really?
It's debated. But he wasn't just a lover. He was practically her co-ruler in many ways, responsible for a lot of military and administrative successes.
And then we have to address the horse rumor.
Ugh. Yes, absolutely infamous and totally, utterly false. A grotesque story spread by her enemies after she died, purely to smear her legacy, undermine her reputation as a powerful woman.
So what was the political impact of rumors like that, even false ones, being spread about the empress?
They were absolutely designed to delegitimize her, especially as a woman wielding that much power. The goal was to paint her as unstable, morally corrupt, unfit to rule.
Did it work?
During her lifetime, not really. Catherine was incredibly skilled at managing her image, using her intelligence to counter these things. She understood that consistent, effective governing was the best antidote to scandal.
Interesting.
And interestingly, while critics called her immoral, Catherine herself seemed pretty philosophical about it all. Believed pleasure was natural, and personal relationships didn't have to derail public duty. She compartmentalized, separated emotion from governance. A skill few male rulers managed, frankly.
But despite all her control, her reign wasn't smooth sailing. There was real peril.
Oh, yes. In 1773, that peril showed up looking like a bearded Cossack named Yemelyan Pugachev.
Pugachev. Not just any rebel.
No. He claimed to be Peter III,
Her dead husband.
her dead husband.
Yeah.
Supposedly survived the coup, now back to reclaim the throne from the German usurper, as he called her.
An audacious claim.
Totally audacious. But for Russia's poor, oppressed, exhausted lower classes, the claim didn't need to be true. It just needed to offer hope.
Hope for what?
Liberation, end to serfdom, lower taxes, land for the people. His words just ignited this fire across the Volga region. Cossacks, peasants, old believers, they flocked to him.
It became huge.
The largest peasant uprising in Russian history, taking towns, storming fortresses, slaughtering nobles. For a terrifying moment, it looked like the whole empire might crack apart.
Catherine must have been seriously shaken. This wasn't a foreign enemy.
Oh no, this was a violent revolt from inside, threatening the whole social order. But Catherine, she didn't panic.
What'd you do?
Dispatched the professional army, seasoned generals, crushed the rebellion. Ruthlessly.
And Pugachev?
Defeated by 1774. Captured. Dragged back to Moscow in an iron cage. Publicly beheaded. A very stark warning.
And this changed her.
Profoundly. It was a turning point. Those earlier dreams she might have had about freeing the serf, they just quietly vanished.
Why?
The rebellion showed her the terrifying limits of Enlightenment ideas in a country still basically feudal. She realized she needed the nobles who'd stayed loyal. So she leaned on them harder, gave them even more control over their serfs in return for support.
So less reform, more control.
Exactly. Reform became much more cautious. Surveillance across the empire ramped up dramatically.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how a ruler's personal ideals, maybe genuinely progressive ones, can just be shattered by the harsh reality of trying to keep control. It really forces that question. How do you weigh those ideals against the need for stability? Pugachev forced Catherine to choose, and she chose stability. A pivot from idealist to pragmatist. Survival of the state above all. So, by the time Catherine reached the end of her life, she'd ruled Russia for over 30 years, longer than any woman before her in Russia.
An incredibly long reign.
From the moment she grabbed power, she defied expectations, reshaped the empire, turned it into a real European powerhouse.
Her achievements are just undeniable. Russia's territory grew massively. Over 200,000 square miles added.
Yeah.
Crimea, big chunks of Poland, that Black Sea coast.
Not just lines on a map.
No, strategic wins. Those warm water ports were vital for trade, for global influence. But her legacy wasn't just military. Her cultural mark was huge, too.
Like the Hermitage.
Helped found the Hermitage Museum, built one of Europe's greatest art collections, corresponded with Voltaire, Diderot, the big Enlightenment minds, cemented Russia's place intellectually. Her court became this center of sophistication, art, ambition.
And education.
Modernized education, founded schools for girls like Smolenty, promoted printing. She even pushed smallpox inoculation, getting vaccinated herself publicly.
Which was incredibly brave and forward-thinking back then.
Absolutely. Real public health leadership.
It's amazing how she balanced that huge expansion with these internal, cultural, scientific efforts. What was the long-term impact of something like the Hermitage or the school reforms? Did it last beyond her reign?
Oh, definitely. The Hermitage wasn't just a gallery, it became a symbol of Russia's cultural arrival on the European stage. It influenced art patronage for centuries. And the education reforms, while maybe limited in reach initially, they laid crucial groundwork, slowly broadened access to secular learning, built an infrastructure for Enlightenment ideas that kept growing, even if uneven.
Yeah, always that other side. Her reign was full of contradictions.
Deep contradictions.
Admired Enlightenment ideals, championed education, but never freed the serfs. In fact, she extended serfdom into the new territories, tightened the chains on millions.
Exactly. Her reforms, impressive as they were, mostly stayed top down. Polishing the empire, maybe, but not fundamentally changing its social structure.
So how do we sum her up?
She ruled by sheer force of will. Political brilliance, relentless calculation, not divine right. She was called everything: usurper, tyrant, reformer, seductress, but above all, she was effective.
Yeah.
She knew her position was precarious. Foreign woman came to power via coup, ruling an empire not used to women in charge. And yet, she didn't just survive, she thrived. When she died in 1796, Russia was bigger, richer, more powerful than it had been in centuries. She left a secure throne, an expanded empire, and its enduring legend. She crafted her image so carefully, understood the power of story just as much as the power of the sword. She didn't just wear the crown, did she? She fundamentally rewrote what it meant to deserve one. Beautifully put, yes. So what does Catherine the Great's story tell you, our listener, about power, ambition, legacy? Beyond the history books, what lessons are there? A woman navigating a man's world with such incredible intellect and, frankly, audacity.
Maybe her greatest lesson is how she took her personal story and turned it into this public legend, proving that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we carefully, meticulously craft ourselves.